Hi, my name is Michael Hoffman. Welcome to my video series. It's based on an instruction book that I wrote several years ago called Serious Guitar. And since these videos are based on the book, first I want to talk about the book a little bit and explain a bit about that, and then I'll come back and talk about the videos and how you can best use those to get the most out of them. So as you may have read a moment ago, and on the cover of the book it says that I'm describing the book as a detailed, comprehensive study of scales, chords, progressions, and the harmonic ideas of improvisation. And it definitely is that. But I could also describe it as a complete musical education in one book. And I know that might sound like a bold statement to a lot of you, but the book backs it up. It covers a massive amount of material. You don't need to know anything about theory in order to use this book, because it starts at the beginning. It starts with a discussion on intervals. It explains how to count them. It then gets into a discussion on major, minor, and dominant and what those terms actually mean. Right? Major, minor, and dominant are the three categories of chords and scales that we play in music. So there's a very concise description of what those terms actually mean. It then gets into a key signature, and it spends a lot of time discussing the key of G. I just chose the key of G to use as an example in the book, but it spends a lot of time in one key because you need to learn a lot about what's going on in a key. There's a lot happening in a key. So that's where Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, and Locrian, those scales come from. So those are covered in detail, along with the major, minor, and dominant pentatonic scales associated with them, the chords associated with them. Progressions related around those scales and chords are all covered in a lot of detail. There is also a ton of supporting charts, diagrams, and tabbed and notated examples throughout the book that are all really, really useful. And they end up being time savers because you can visualize things a little bit sooner, a little bit easier with all these diagrams and charts. I spent a lot of time before we even start the first scale on this groundwork that needs to be laid so that everybody is on the same page. That's really important. There's a practicing process that I take you through with this first scale, and it's the same process that you're going to use for every scale you ever do. So we need to spend some time doing this on the first scale so that you can learn the process. But once you do, any other scale that you do is going to move along quicker and quicker and quicker because you're becoming more and more used to that process. This process also trains your ears. It's really important to get your ears trained, and if you play the notes in a scale long enough, your ears will get used to what that scale sounds like. This process that I take you through in the book, I'm also going to do it in the videos, is a huge time saver. It just cuts to the chase and has you practicing and listening to a scale in a certain way so that your ears very quickly get trained to what's going on in that scale. So it's an important concept, and I spent some time on that. So after it gets into a key signature in all its detail, it then gets into the harmonic minor mode, then the melodic minor mode, and with all its associated scales and chords and progressions, then the half-whole diminished mode, and the whole tone mode. So it's a lot of stuff that's covered. In fact, maybe I'm going to hold up the table of contents of the book. And there are actually things that I didn't put in the table of contents in between some of that stuff. So there's even a little bit more than that. I sold this book online for years, and I sold a lot of copies, and I got a lot of feedback. You know, it was all positive feedback. But what I want to mention here are a handful of emails that I got from a specific group of people. These are all guys, and I think there's a girl in there too. These were all people that wanted to go to music college, but they couldn't go for whatever reason. They couldn't afford it, whatever the reason was. And they all had buddies that were going to music college, so they felt kind of left out. And these particular people were looking for a book that they could study from and learn as much as they could. These people happened to pick my book, Serious Guitar, and they studied from just it. And when they started comparing how much they understood about music and how well they were starting to play compared to their friends that went to music college, in each case, they were better or certainly equal to the people that went to music college, but in some cases they felt they were better players and understood more than the people that went to music school. Okay, so that's a pretty good endorsement of what's going on with the book. It is covering a ton of stuff. And obviously it doesn't matter what style of music that you want to play. All of this information applies to all kinds of music. So if you want to be a rock player, a blues player, a jazz player, it doesn't matter. You'll be able to do any and all of that if you choose. It's also very beneficial to get this kind of information, especially when there's this much of it. It's beneficial to get it from one source when it's possible. You know, when I was a kid, I had to get all this stuff piecemeal. I was looking for everything I could to figure out what was going on, and I would get a little bit of information here, a little bit from this book, a little from this guy, a little bit from somewhere else, and it was a nightmare when I tried to put it all together so that I understood that as a whole, one whole thing. It seemed like a bunch of, you know, pieces that didn't fit together. Later on, I did come across a teacher that was extremely good and helped me out quite a bit in putting all this together. But it was a nightmare up until that point. So being able to get all of this information from one source when it's explained correctly is a huge benefit, because you don't have all these different ideas of what's going on when you're talking about these subjects. You're going to find that even accomplished musicians talk about musical ideas in different ways. There's not one specific way that everybody thinks about everything. And that does make it difficult when you try to get information from different sources. So the fact that it's all here and there's one train of thought running through the entire book, you're going to find is a very beneficial thing, because there's not going to be any confusion about what to do, where this fits in, or what comes next, what should you be doing now. It's all laid out in one spot. So it's a good way to learn this stuff. So that's basically it about the book. The videos, they're numbered, okay? I numbered them for a reason. It's really important to watch these videos in order. They go step by step, just like the book does. You know, it starts by a discussion on intervals. It then gets into the major, minor, dominant thing. It covers the keys, everything I was talking about before. But there's no way that I can cover everything that's in the book. The book just has way too much stuff in it. But watch the videos in order. I can't know who's going to be clicking on these videos, so I can't know anybody's level of experience or expertise on any of these subjects, so I have to start at the beginning. It's the only way to do it that makes any sense. So I would say roughly in these videos you're going to get about 25% of what's in the book. Unfortunately, you won't get the supporting diagrams and examples and stuff, although I certainly will be demonstrating stuff. You won't have the hard copy, you know, diagrams and charts and whatnot, which are actually very useful. They're big time savers. So that's about it. It's important also, let me mention this, to not move ahead too quickly. Yes, you have to watch them in order, but don't move ahead too quickly. Most students are guilty of this. In a book situation, learning from a book, and I would imagine in a video series, the temptation is going to be to click on the next thing or turn the next page to get to the next topic. You've really got to get the topic that you're working on nailed before you move on to the next one. Otherwise, you're going to have a snowball effect that you're not going to like. Things will become more and more shaky. Your playing is going to sound less and less and less concise unless you're very clear on the thing that you're working on before you move on to the next one. That's important. Can't stress that enough. So, I'll leave a link somewhere. You can email me if you think you want a copy of the book. If not, use these videos. I hope you get a lot out of them. Subscribe if you like, and hope you guys have a good time with it.